Hello, I'm Karl Toerge. Welcome to Fliptopia and to another edition of Conversations, a series of interviews that I conducted over the years with some of the incredible and wonderful people that I collaborated with and worked together on so many just wonderful animated productions. One of the reasons I love animation so much, the people that make the product. Tonight it's a special honor to share my interview with my very good friend and mentor, Mr. Joe Barbera, who with Bill Hanna created Hanna Barbera Productions, home of so many of the great legendary animation characters. Yogi Bear, Huckleberry Hound, Jonny Quest, Flintstones, Jetsons, Top Cat, Scooby Doo, Hong Kong Phooey, Inch High Private Eye, the list goes on and on and on. Guys, the whole studio was an amazing melting pot of talent. And before that, of course, Joe and Bill collaborated on creating and directing and producing Tom and Jerry for MGM. They were spectacular people. I didn't know Bill that well. However, I worked with Joe on the first original Tom and Jerry cartoon in 30 years. And I have to tell you, in a career filled with wonderful moments and memories, that is one of the pinnacles. Joe was a great guy and truly a wonderful friend and a great guy to work with. Truly the hippest guy in the room, fun, smart, witty, and genuinely endearing, a very lovable person. It is my pleasure for us to share this interview with Joe with all of you out there. Enjoy it. He was a treasure. Thanks for watching us at Fliptopia. Please keep watching us. It's all about making you smile. Burn that frown upside down and smile. You're watching Fliptopia. It's a state of mind. Thank you so much for joining us. Goodbye.
But at the age of 4 years old, my mother moved us out of New York to Brooklyn, which gave me some of the happiest days of my life. Brooklyn was a beautiful place at that time, beautiful homes, beautiful streets and boulevards, and copied a lot of English stuff because the names of the streets were Rugby Road, Marlborough Road, Albemarle Theater, Rialto movie. It was all English. And that's where we arrived in and got an apartment at the end of the corner of 18th Street and Church Avenue. And what happened was one day it was raining like mad. And I was lying on the floor with a pad and I saw a picture of a dog chasing a kitten. A puppy chasing a kitten. Something kind of fascinated me about it. So what I did was I got a pad and I copied it. I didn't trace it off, I copied it by looking at the page here and drawing over here. And it didn't mean anything to me at that time. It was interesting, but I suddenly wanted to draw. So I started to draw in my spare time, which was mainly doing the class at school. That was my spare time. And I kept drawing. I was doing portraits, by the way, of several professors at Fordham University. And I had photographs of them, and they wanted to do a pencil drawing. So what I did was I did 4 of them for them and duplicated them very, very well. I surprised myself. And I got $5 for each one of them.
Wow.
$20 for 4 portraits, which were about this big. Now, by that time, I had moved out of New York into Brooklyn and was living in Brooklyn. My father, who later vanished in a cloud of smoke, got me a job in the bank, Irving Trust Company, 1 Wall Street, 2nd floor, looking down on 5th Avenue or whatever it was. And I went in and applied. I was 16, and they were paying NRA money at that time, which I think it was $16 a week.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to improve my banking experience, and I went to banking school. Total waste of time. I mean, and lo and behold, they kept me there for 6 years. What happened there was one important note. During that 6 years, I began to draw cartoons, the single block cartoons with a gag under them. And I was doing that because that was the only outlet I had for whatever I had inside of me, was coming out with these single block cartoons. And I settled on using 2 policemen, like a Laurel and Hardy team or an Abbott Costello team. This was 2 policemen, and they were driving a car, which was like a convertible at that time, and they had their number on the side of the car. And one of the first cartoons I sold had the 2 policemen driving down the street, looking very puzzled. Over here on the sidewalk were the people laughing and pointing at them and laughing, and the policemen were looking at each other, indicating they didn't know what they were laughing about. What they didn't see was that hanging on the back bumper was a sign saying "Just Married." That was my very first gag I ever sold, and for that I got $25.
Wow, good money.
I went home one night after work, and my mother was standing there with an envelope. She gave it to me. It was a large envelope. I opened it up. Here was a check that folded. I never saw that before either. The check that folded. I didn't know what that was about. Anyway, I went home and showed it to my mother. Fainted on the floor of the kitchen, etc. And I stayed at the bank and kept doing 5 cartoons a week. And every week I would go up to Collier's magazine, and I would leave 5 cartoons there and pick up the rejects. Next week, leave them down, pick the rejects. And then I sold the first one. Then I sold the second one, the third one. Each one of them had the 2 policemen as the stars.
Oh, that's great.
And sold the 4th one, about which time I got fired. So I remember walking out on the sidewalk at the 5th Avenue and Wall Street there, and felt like the albatross was lifted off my neck, you know. I was a free man. I had gotten to know a fellow that worked in the newspaper, because I took a couple of courses at the Art Students League on 57th Street.
Sure.
Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. And about that time, I got fired. So I'm walking down 5th Avenue the next day, and I ran into a fraternity brother. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm going to go down to Greenwich Village and starve." I wasn't kidding. I had heard that what they did was they cooked spaghetti and they drained it through a tennis racket, drained the water, and put the spaghetti somewhere like that. So I'm walking, this fellow said to me, "Why don't you go across the street? They're starting an animation studio over there. Tell them you're an animator." I said to myself, "What's an animator?" I never animated anything in my life. Anyway, the next day I arrived at the company. It was called Van Buren Productions.
Yeah.
I arrived there with 4 cartoons under my arm, printed in a magazine. Collier's magazine, bought 4 of them by that time. And I went into this place and something must have got them over there. When I walked in with these 4 magazines, they the guy that was talking to me said, just wait a minute. And he went, and he left, and he came back, and he got me, took me in to see the head guy, who was a guy from Disney called Gillette. Gillette was his last name. He was the animator or something at Disney.
Wow.
And I went back in, and he looked at me, sitting in a chair behind the desk. He had a shiny head, and he's glaring, and his eyes are glittering. I said, holy Moses, what's going on here? He said, he just looked at me, and looked at me, and looked at me. All of a sudden he said, how much do you want? I said, I was getting 27, I think. And I said, $30 a week. He said, we'll let you know. So he left, and I left. And they called me the next day and hired me.
Wow.
For 30. Now, I'm an animator, and an in-betweener, if you know what that is. Cleanup man. I didn't know what they were talking about. But in 6 months, by every single weekend, every single night, I would be practicing animation. I would make up something to animate. And I did that for 6 months, and then all of a sudden I got another raise. No, I was made an animator. It actually took 6 months to become an animator. But even at that time, I was fascinated by storyboard.
Uh-huh.
So I went home and I did a whole storyboard by myself. Never having done one before, with a character called Kiko the Kangaroo. Heaven help us, you know. The character was terrible. My storyboard was okay, because next thing I know, they made me a regular storyboard man.
Oh, wow.
So, but you were pounding away at it all the time. Single cartoons, run up there, and I'll tell you how it was. When you sold a cartoon to colleges, I was at Wall Street, you'd watch the clock. They were very tough on you. I'm telling you, the people in the bank, they were mean. And all of a sudden it went, click, lunchtime. Run down the hall, run down the stairs, come out at the Wall Street subway station, get on the express, up to 15th Street or 14th Street, up to 34th Street, get off at Park Avenue, which was underneath the big train station up there. Run across the interior of Grand Central. Come out on Park Avenue, run in there, get on an elevator, go up to a floor, walk into this room, leave the car, 5 new cartoons, pick up the new one, run down, get back in the subway again, zip down to Wall Street. That would take 1 hour.
Gee.
And all that kept you going was the hope of selling another one.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But when I became an animator, then I just quit that. I didn't have time to do those cartoons at night. So what happened was that I spent some time with the Paul Terry studio. Paul Terry studio made Kiko the Kangaroo and whatever else they made. But they were there for production, not for quality, as far as I could see.
So this would be Paul Terry of Terry Tunes?
Paul Terry.
Right.
Now, right in the middle of that, by coincidence, one of the fellows that was an animator there knew a guy at Disney's out on the coast.
Really?
And Disney, we found out, was looking for people, not Disney, MGM,
Ah.
was looking for people to start a cartoon studio with. So I'm sitting there, and they made me an offer. Based on a very short experience, they made me an offer to come out to the coast. So I had a girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
I had a new car I had just indebted myself to. It was a 1936 Ford Roadster.
Wow.
Possibly the neatest car you could ever own, an 8-cylinder car. If I had just kept it, I could have it today, it'd be worth a fortune. But I didn't. I sold it. Not yet. No, I'm still in New York.
Uh-huh.
I got an offer to come to California and become part of the animation studio at MGM. So I was dragging my feet, hesitating about it, and payday came. No, before that, I met Paul Terry, who was the head of the studio, at the water fountain. And he's looking at me, and he used to have a cigar hanging in his mouth all the time. He had a big dent in his mouth here, and he just hummed the cigar. And he said to me out the corner of his mouth, he says, "I'm taking care of you." And he was tapping the cigar, and I said to myself, what does he mean by that? Taking care of me?
Oops.
Are you going to rub me out or what? So anyway, the next day was the day they gave out the check. So here, payroll does it. He's walking down this aisle and he leans over. The accountant of the company leans over and gives me a check. As I remember, the check that I had was 65, and they were offering me 75, something like that. In the meantime, the company out in California would pay $87.50 a week or a month, I forget what it was, if I would come to California. So now I'm thinking to myself, geez, I got a girlfriend, I just got this new car. It was a used car, but it was practically brand new. And what should I do? And just as I was doing it, this big arm came in and grabbed the check, pulled it back like that. It was the accountant. And he disappeared. He said, made a mistake, but he disappeared. Then he came right back again and gave me another check. And he had cut a $10 raise that they gave me. He cut it down to $5, to $5 raise. So instead of, let's say, getting 75, I was getting 70. Well, once they did that, my mind went click, and I left the next day.
The next day?
Drive to California.
Wow. And that was the first time you'd ever been out of New York City?
First time I've been out of what?
Out of Brooklyn or out of New York? That was your first time
First
out?
time.
Wow. So you just started driving off across the country?
Yeah, I got a guy. No, I got a kid that wanted to go to California, and he just drove out with me.
Oh, wow.
And we just drove for about 4 days. And arrived in Culver City. I arrived in downtown LA, which is about the most discouraging place in the world. I mean, there was nothing in downtown LA except orange trees. And arrived at a little hotel, which is still there, where most of the people that went to California went to this hotel called the Mark Twain Hotel.
Okay.
$10 a week, which gave you a bed and maid service. That's about all. And then the next day you would drive over to Culver City, which was very depressing in those days. And we'd sit around and talk about California and where they came from and whatever was going on. So there was, I guess I was around $75 by that time. And what was happening was that it's the usual mistake somebody makes or companies make. They open up a new business and they put somebody in that's recommended by somebody or whatever who has no experience at all with the business. And that result is disaster. So actually the studio, our studio, which was over in Culver City, I mean, by the time you drove from, let's say, Hollywood to Culver City, it's just downhill all the way. And all the fog and mist and all the stuff was in Culver City. Your hair was wet if you had a convertible, so you stopped using convertibles. And things got worse. When I say worse, from bad to worse. And the material that was being dreamed up was not working or impressing anybody. So right about the middle of that, Bill Hanna he was one of the employees there who worked as a director or a storyman or whatever what was assigned. I was assigned as an animator and a storyman, and started doing a lot of sketching myself, which I had never done before. And what happened there was that as they moved men around and personnel around, Bill and I ended up in a room alone. And we were sitting back like that, just like we're doing right here. And I said, why don't we do a cartoon of our own? Well, we're sitting here doing nothing. Let's do one of our own. And we settled on a cat and a mouse, upon which everybody poo-pooed the idea. Anybody can do a cat and a mouse, and it's an old stuff, and everyone's done it before. And Terry Toon was doing 8,000. He'd do a cat and a mouse cartoon, and it'd be a repeat of a bunch of mice chasing a cat, and the cat is shooting them with machine guns, and all this kind of bad taste.
Yep.
And just about that time, as we were about sinking, MGM decided to close the studio. Oh, I know why it was. Television showed up.
Oh.
Television reared its head, and they were terrified. So that's when I knew we were going to close the studio. And that's about when I said to Bill, why don't we do one of our own, which we did. And the way we did it was I did the story, and I was laying it out at the same time, and Bill timed it and handed it out to the animators, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happened about that time was that anywhere as you went, you were turned down flat because they said you can't afford to do animation for television. You can't do it for anything. You can't afford animation. It's too expensive, which theoretically it was. It's too expensive and you can't do it, and et cetera, et cetera. So we went ahead and we finished this cartoon, which by that time was called Pussycats the Boot. And that cartoon, we shot the pencil test and the pencil drawings and ran it without putting a color on it yet. And we got such a reaction in the theater. I mean, at the studio, we ran it in black and white, pencil drawings, and it got roaring laughs. They were on the floor laughing at it. So Quimby, who was the manager of the studio,
Fred Quimby,
went on later on to call himself producer. He was the manager of the studio. He decided to go ahead and finish the cartoon and put color on it, which we did. Then at Academy Award time, we entered that cartoon and got a tremendous response on it. In fact, I think we won the first
Academy Award, correct?
I think the Academy Award.
I think so, yeah.
Which I should have up here. I have the 8 Emmys, 7 Academy Awards and 8 Emmys. And we didn't put any of them back in here. This is all awards. I have like 247 of them.
Now, were you able to keep the Academy Award, or did that go to Quimby?
No, he took them.
Jeez.
He took them, which he had no right to do that. That's straight outright robbery.
Yeah.
I mean, even in the rules of the Academy, it doesn't say that the business manager can take an Academy Award. It's awarded to people for their creativity, their originality. There's a certain set of rules for them. And we didn't know anything about the strategy or how they did it. It comes to Academy Award night, and we went there, Bill and I, and it comes to the Academy Award nomination, and up walks Quimby and takes it. No.
You didn't get to go on stage?
Not even on stage, not even to give you a dinner or an after-show dinner. It finally ended up that Bill and I decided to give a dinner, a small dinner, And while we were doing it, Quimby decided to take the check for the dinner. And he never acknowledged anything. I mean, now, can you imagine winning 7 of them and not being able to go up and take it and have someone taking the credit for it? It was an outright robbery.
Yeah, it had to be heartbreaking.
Oh, man.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we actually won, without any question, 7 Academy Awards, 9 nominations, and 8 Emmys, all in about this first year. Tom and Jerry kept us. We did Tom and Jerry for 20 years.
20 years.
20 years, that's all we did.
127 episodes, right?
Well, we did maybe
Shorts.
We did a Tom and Jerry, we did it for 20 years, and then they closed that down.
How'd they close it down?
They closed it down. Why did they close it down?
I mean, the cartoons were obviously generating a lot of publicity and income, so what, were they just tired of doing cartoons financially? They couldn't handle it? What?
Yeah, why in the hell did they do that? Well, what happened was that MGM, I remember, MGM got out of the business.
Ah.
MGM closed down the studio, and Bill and I, well, we were in Culver City at that time. Bill and I went over, started looking for space, and we ended up almost immediately at the Charlie Chaplin studio on La Brea. You know where that is?
Yes.
And we went in there, and whatever the rent was, we made a deal to use their offices there.
Uh-huh.
And because it fascinated me, because I'm a big Charlie Chaplin fan.
Yes, I know you are.
I know every one of them. I know every joke they ever did. He's a brilliant genius of all geniuses. And we just caught on. And the first thing that happened out of that particular studio was the Rough and Ready.
Were you worried about your future when you started the studio, or did you have confidence that you'd be able to succeed?
Well, I tell you, you're too busy worrying
Uh-huh.
to have confidence.
Sure.
But the thing was is that somehow or other we got involved with an advertising agency who were looking for stuff for the Kellogg's people at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And we had already done Rough and Ready. And we were about to go out of business there. So what happened was that an agency and a producer in New York was doing a children's show. And he needed 5 more minutes. And he had heard that Rough and Ready was 5-minute cartoons.
Ah.
So he made a deal to take the Rough and Ready. I think there were 13 of them. So that's what kept us going. We started with that. By the time we finished that job, we were on
Yogi?
Rough and Ready.
Oh yeah, Rough and Ready.
Now from Rough and Ready, now I had never gone into an agency in my life. I had never tried to sell an agency or anything. I hadn't the faintest idea what it was all about. Just suddenly I was thrust out into the street for the second time. And so what happened was that the agency guy came over and we talked with him, Lee Bland, a guy named Lee Bland. And the next thing we did was we were in the second thing I created was Huckleberry Hound.
Ah.
And once I started Huckleberry Hound, they needed a half hour. So we came up with 2 more characters, Yogi Bear and Pixie and Dixie.
With Mr. Jinx.
And I got to tell you something, you'd be surprised at the reaction we got.
Oh, I'm sure you were.
I went into New York with 2 prints, black and white, pencil. And one was Pixie and Dixie, that was Dawes Butler was the cat. Huckleberry Hound, Dawes Butler was Huckleberry Hound.
That's right.
What was the other one?
Yogi?
Yogi Bear, Dawes Butler was Yogi Bear.
And Don Messick was the Ranger.
And I just loved the material to work on it because it was fun material. I really enjoyed it. And when So what happened was that I fly into Chicago, and I have under my arm the print in black and white pencil test of Yogi Bear and Huckleberry Hound. And the agency top brass is sitting in this room. And before they came in there, a couple of the other executives they had told me that there's a button here under the table and you just press it when you're ready to roll the film for us, and we'll take care of the whole thing. And a lot of instructions. And we're sitting in this conference room, and in comes a horde of executives, like over 42 of them. And before they came in the room, the agency guy, Roy Lang, had run into me and said, "We're running late. They haven't had a drink. They haven't had any lunch, and they're getting mean."
Oh, great.
Isn't that a great introduction?
I'm going to say, no small task ahead.
They're getting mean. so in they come, snapping and snarling, charming and snapping and clawing at people, and sat down. And I got introduced by John Mitchell at the time, who was the head of sales. And there were so many guys that they were right eyeball to eyeball almost, you know. And I'm sitting there, I'm standing by this time, I was backed up against the wall with all these animals, you know. So now I said, okay, press the button. So we pressed the button, out comes the wrong tracks with the wrong film, which is normal for any of the big agencies. I mean, the wrong voice behind Yogi, you know. Oops. So we stopped it quick. I had to ad-lib for 15 minutes. Oh, you know, to give you another knocker, a guy that still communicates with me, he was the head of foreign sales. But all these guys came in, and I'm backed up, and they introduced me. And this voice comes out of this mob saying, "You got any children?" So I'm sitting there, I'm saying to myself, I'm going, I couldn't remember whether I had children or not. That's a true story, I blacked out.
I believe it.
I couldn't remember how many children I had. And this man is still a great friend of mine today. And I can't remember his name, but I know the name, it's an Italian name. So what happened was we started to run, and sure enough, the wrong tracks. We fixed that. Then we ran the film, and I went back to the hotel in Chicago, and the phone rings, and this guy says, "Joe," he says, "go out and get a bottle of champagne and celebrate you sold the show."
Wow.
So that actually went into three sets of characters. Then, at the same time, suddenly they called me one day and they said, "We're having trouble filling a spot. We need another show. Can you help us?" So I went click, click, click. And I said, "Well, why don't we do Yogi Bear?" Which they bought. So that was the second show we had. So Yogi Bear spawned Quick Draw, I think, and something else.
Yeah. So you just spun off from the main show. You just put those characters off on
Well,
their
you
own.
got to figure, according to the numbers that they gave me one day here, roughly, that we had 77,000 characters, I think, in 3,500 cartoons.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. That's not counting everything, but pretty much.
Did you feel any sense of gratification with the success of Yogi and Huck and Pixie and
yeah,
Dixie? The fact that they were on all the Kellogg's cereal boxes that kids all across the country were inundated with that?
But for instance now, the first show we did was Huckleberry Hound, right? And we won the Academy Award with it. Oh, the Emmy, I'm sorry.
Emmy, yeah.
We won the Emmy.
And you got to receive that, correct?
Yeah, that we got to keep, we had though.
That had to be the sweetest feeling in the world when you went up there and actually held that.
Yes,
Vindication.
I mean, how many people go out and win 15 of one and, not 15 of one, 7 of one, And Huckleberry Hound was how many?
I mean, well, you had 8 Emmys and seven
8
Academy
Emmys,
Awards.
there's 15, without counting the big important ones, you know. Those are important, but there's some big ones here that, like the gold dish up there.
Well, I got to ask you a question, style-wise, that I've always wondered about, I'm sure.
Yeah.
When you did Tom and Jerry, they were lush, fully animated characters with full backgrounds that were very well.
Not really.
Well, they were very well done pictures. I mean, they had a lot. They almost, you know, they had a movie feel to them. And then when you worked in television, you did a very stylized.
It was limited animation.
And so you felt that that was the way to go. Just
well, that's all the budget you had.
Sure.
I mean, it was budget. I mean, one of the deals that we did was we turned out series. We turned out a half-hour Flintstone for $30,000. We turned out like the deals would be sometimes for 31 half hours, 28 half hours. Jumping ahead, when I sold the banana splits, I sold 17 hours. That was a mix of live action and animation.
That's
and special features and all that.
So the dollar really determined the style right away.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I was going to say,
but we proved that if you had the good material and presented it right, then you didn't have to spend $40,000 or $60,000, whatever it was.
Oh, by all means. No, I think that those cartoons are beautiful. I mean, they're
well,
so
we got just
beautifully
as
drawn.
many laughs as if they were done with all that over-animated stuff.
And did your Chaplin influence play into that, do you think?
My what?
Your love of Chaplin, did that play into your...
Absolutely. Well, as you can see, Tom and Jerry was without voices.
That's right.
Silent cartoon. And everything they did was in pantomime. But I loved the material. And, like, for instance, if I would get an idea, like we had a guy that had a title, Bowling Alley Cat. That's all he contributed to. After 6 months of contributing, this is all that came up. So we went ahead and did the cartoon. As I say we, it's me. We didn't have a story department. And what happened was, when I got the idea to make Bowling Alley Cat as a cartoon, I would just go right to work on it. We didn't have any meetings, we didn't have any committees, we didn't have any groups, any of that, where they rip your material apart without improving it at all. And for instance, we had, like, when you get Puss in Boots, that's just a title. But the idea was that way. The idea was pretty simple. Tom is told that if anything else breaks, he's out. See, the show starts with the chase and they break something. He says, if there's any more breaking around here, you're OWT out. So now the mouse hears that. And from then on, there's a bunch of gags where he almost has the mouse, but the mouse has this glass and he holds it over the edge of a table or something like that. And there's a bunch of those quick gags like that, and the people were roaring. Gag after gag. Then Yogi turned out to be more of a personality guy. He had lines that were funny, and a certain way of delivering them that was funny. So you had Puss in Boots, which was a strict chase, very chase, big chase stuff, with surprise gags. Oh, and the Pixie and Dixie were great.
Yeah.
And remember now, this was that many years ago. The first cartoon we did with Pixie and Dixie had martial arts. Nobody was doing that.
That's right, that's right.
Nobody had that.
Hishi, ha!
Yeah, well, it was at the very beginning of the picture. The mice are getting chased by the cat, and they duck into a hole and escape for the time being, but they're fed up with it, so they get the yellow pages, and they look up cats or whatever it was. I said, are you bothered by a cat? If so, call Judo Jack, and he'll take care of it, you know what I mean? So there's a knock on the door, and it's this little mouse, half the size of Tom and Jerry, or Jerry.
Dixie and Dixie.
And they bow, and then he turns around and walks over. He walks out, and he walks right past the cat who's leaning against the wall. The cat looks surprised, looks at him walking by. Hey, like hold up there. He says, you know, it's like, he had a certain delivery. Oh, he says, and he says, I'm the king of the castle in here, you know. And then you hear off stage the damnedest crashing around. And you cut inside, and Tom is all wrapped up in a knot. And he says, geez, does anybody like see a truck go by or something like that?
That's right. That's exactly right. Sheesh, did anybody here see a truck go by? Yeesh.
Yeah, like I'm the king of the castle here and all that kind of stuff.
Those cartoons are very topical. At the time, were things that were going on around you, did they influence the cartoons that you came up with, like Mr. Jinx being a beatnik cat, or the mice learning karate? I know it was a popular thing for a while. Or jumping ahead, say Jonny Quest, which was a spy kind of a show. Did you have a feeling about what kind of stuff kids were interested in, so you kind of incorporate that to your cartoons, or was it just whatever interested you?
Well, mainly if I got the idea, I would do it. If I didn't get the idea, we wouldn't do it. That's all it's doing. But
I think that's a funny idea, a beatnik cat. I just think it's funny.
Oh yeah, I loved it.
Because he's a cool cat.
But remember that I had heard Dawes do the voice a few times.
Oh, okay, so that gave you kind of a springboard.
That gave me a springboard. Like you two Mises, he says, I hate Mises to pieces. That became a kind of a signal, or
oh yeah.
I hate Mises to pieces.
Oh.
And he yelled it out loud. Well, how do we stand here?
We're doing very well.
You want to?
When you were coming up with a cartoon, do you hear the voices of the characters?
I kind of am looking for something, but I don't know.
Like Yogi, for instance. Yogi's such a unique.
He's terrific.
Yeah. Did you hear that voice when you were?
No, I didn't hear it until I heard it. When Dawes would do a voice, and I would hear it. Like he'd do like 9 different kinds of southern voices. I would take one of them. Then you'd have to do the material to it, you know.
Were you involved in the music on those shows?
Oh yeah.
Because it's a complete package. I mean, obviously there's a lot of thought put into the style, the voices.
Bill actually was the music man. But actually, if I would have to write the music stuff into the story. Because I would get an idea from music and all that, and dancing, and I would do the dancing and show Bill the steps and stuff like that. Then he would go ahead and we would call the music man in and tell him what we were looking for. And once he got the idea, then he would go off and try to write a tune or whatever. Each job was particular, was special.
What about the names of the characters? Did you come up with the names?
Most of the time. That was part of the story thing. And sometimes a name of a like Bowling Alley Cat inspired a story, which then also inspired Cue Ball Cat. Inspired. You had to have those kind of ideas.
So what made you come up with the Jetsons?
Well, that was pretty simple. We had the Flintstones, and that was a tough deal to get that name. We had to drop Gladstone, and we had to get rid of another one, and they finally ended up with the Flintstone.
Flagstone, that's right.
Yeah, we had to fight to keep that, and they wouldn't let us. And finally ended up with the Flintstone, that was fine. And once we did that, which was back in the Stone Age, what's the next one you're going to do? Well, it's kind of pretty simple. You go into the future. So we did the future. Now after we did that, what was the next step? Back to square one.
That's right. That's right.
Because they now have to repair all of that stuff, you know?
That's exactly right.
So
Do you have a favorite character of all your Hanna-Barbera creations, including Tom and Jerry? Do you have a favorite?
Well, it's very hard to choose between Yogi Bear, Tom and Jerry, Flintstones. How can you choose and say, this one is better than the other one?
No, I was thinking the
not
same
true.
thing. But I thought I'd ask you just the same. I didn't think you had one favorite, but...
Well, at lunchtime we were talking about Magilla Gorilla,
Of course.
Inch High Private Eye.
Squiddly Diddly, Peter Potamus.
Squiddly Diddly's a hell of a character.
Oh, I love Squiddly Diddly. As a kid, I always thought that was a great character. Wally Gator, Top
But
Cat.
in contrast, one of my shows that I loved was Jonny Quest. And that came from a thing, I was inspired by a comic strip done by Caniff. The artist was
Oh,
Caniff.
Milton Caniff, yeah.
And he did,
Steve Canyon. Yeah.
That's the one.
Terry and the Pirates, yeah.
Terry and the Pirate, that's what inspired me. I love that. And what I did was I did 3 minutes of opening cartoon stuff. I just went to New York with the 3 minutes and blew the agency out of the water.
Did you have that title track in there, that music? Was it?
You know that terrific music it had?
Oh. Wait,
Dun, 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 dun,
Da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It really gets your attention right away. Oh, what's this? So you and Bill are obviously very successful. Hanna-Barbera is the fruit of your dreams. You have a giant studio over on Cahuenga. You're employing hundreds of people. Was it everything that you thought it would be?
Well, very hard. Anyone would imagine that you could move from 0 to the top of the line, even in that length of time. But in my particular case, for instance, I think the thing that helped more than anything else was that I didn't run into the roadblocks. And you do creative stuff, there always seems to be 6, 7, or 8 people involved that don't know anything about it. And they're the leaders of the studio, or the head of the studio, or the head of the agency, whatever it is. They're the ones you have to listen to. And it's, those are the roadblocks.
Hanna-Barbera was free of that. It was a very creative
I had
enterprise.
no problem whatsoever. I mean, I never had to ask anybody okay on anything that I worked on. So that was unusual. I mean, that we were able to do that.
I'll say. Well, I mean, it was really a very creative environment because, like you say, you were uncluttered by executives. You and Mr. Hanna ran the studio.
Well, the other thing was I never sold anything in my life as a salesman. And suddenly that's all I was doing. And I was doing it like mechanically. I finished one story here, and by the time I did, if I was flying to New York, I would take a board with me and a pad, and I would make little squares, and I would be writing a story from here to New York. I would have a story when I got off the plane. Turn around and come back and do another story. Turn around and go back the next week and do another story. Well, what that did was keep your writers, you're not your writers, your storyboard people busy, or primarily your layout people and your background people.
That's right.
Those are the people that you kept busy.
That's right.
When we got too busy, then we tried to get other story people, and we didn't get any. Now, in my particular case, if you look at any Tom and Jerry, you'll never see my name on it as a writer, even though I did it. And the reason I did that was I didn't figure I needed to do it.
Right.
I figured, what the heck, everybody knows what I'm doing.
Exactly. You're making the picture. You're not interested in the accolades. You're making the picture.
That's right.
Yeah. Did you ever run across Walt Disney? Were you fellows contemporaries?
One time.
Really?
One time we went to dinner, a summer fair Disney was involved in. And he was telling us, he used to drink a lot.
Yes, he was a drinker.
And he had a temper, you know, the whole thing. But before dinner, we were sitting there, standing actually, with drink in hand and talking about, thank you very much, talking about the business. And he said that he had his own private office right over the buildings across the street, which was right near the entrance at the time. Upstairs he had a private office.
Uh-huh.
So a little later on, we're all sitting down getting ready to eat something. And he's sitting at the end of the table. I was sitting next to him. And he said, I said, that's something I really think it'd be great is to have your own office right at the door and walk in and blah, blah, blah. He said, who told you that?
Oh, Jesus.
He got hostile right away.
Oh.
Who told you that? I said, you did. I forget what else he said, but I could see I was in trouble if I continued that. But he was, that's what I understood, that he would drink too much.
Yeah.
And had a temper.
Great studio, though.
Yeah, well, an example of mentality is, look at the way they crucified Art Babbitt and Bill Teitler.
That's right.
Just because they were resisting, that's when they had to strike.
Mm-hmm.
These were his two best people. But I mean two best people that were reduced to quivering heaps of humanity. Teitler just fell apart in New York.
He did, didn't he?
I took him out a couple of times. He was perspiring and sweating and shaking.
He was a brilliant animator.
Brilliant.
His work was
Remember he
unequaled.
did the King of the Mountain?
Yeah, Night on Bald Mountain.
Bald Mountain.
Well, Stromboli in Pinocchio.
I like that.
Oh, my goodness. And also, didn't he do the whale in Pinocchio?
I don't know, but he was...
He was a
sensational.
magnificent talent.
But Disney would never forgive him. If anyone went on strike, he just crucified them. Which I didn't understand. I mean, and Art Babbitt, he became a beaten mouse, you know.
Yeah. And he was an enormous talent for their early studio. He did so much work for them.
Oh, did he? It was terrific. So
Yeah.
anyway, that was...
And they couldn't end up going to UPA and being with the communists by the river, huh?
no.
Yeah.
I didn't go to UPA.
What did you think about UPA? Did you admire their work? Did you think of it as a
I admired
competitor?
their work, all right.
Yeah.
But they made some glaring errors. For instance, now they had a character called, and I should say that glaring errors. But for instance, they sold a show, a nighttime show, to CBS called Gerald McBoing.
Gerald McBoing, Tee-hee.
They sold it to TV. It might have been as many as 30 shows or 32 shows.
CBS.
But what happened was is that they sold a show, and starring Gerald McBoing, who didn't speak.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
I mean, how can you build a show with a ton of, and the host of the show doesn't speak?
He made sound effects out of his mouth.
He just goes boing, 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 boing.
Well, also their product was a little bit esoteric. I mean, it wasn't for the mass,
Well, that's true.
The mass audience. It was kind of an artistic haven, but I guess they didn't really look at the
Well,
general
anytime
populace.
anything new comes out like that, like I wish him the best of luck,
Sure.
because it keeps this whole series going. It's like Warner's has what the heck? It's that martial arts character.
Oh.
They're working on it right now.
Jackie Chan?
No, we did the Chan Clan.
The Amazing Chan Clan. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, we did that. But then we had people come in and stop us from using the Japanese voices.
Yeah, it was too stereotypical, I guess.
Something like that. So when people say, well, what do you think is behind them loving the character this many years later and all that? I said, the story.
Uh-huh. Well, you must feel genuinely blessed to have had the life you've lived so far and to have worked with so many people and to have known so many wonderfully talented people like Walter Lantz and Chuck Jones.
I think I have a Walter Lantz piece of work hanging here somewhere.
It's right over there over your shoulder.
Chuck Jones, that's right.
I mean, you must really, do you wake up in the morning and think, Jesus, how lucky I am?
Well, I wish it was that easy. when I wake up in the morning now, all I can think of is I got to finish that storyboard. What do you think is behind the love of the characters this many years later and all that? I said the stories. As far as I'm concerned, the stories. For instance, now if you see a Disney picture and you see fields of grain waving in the wind, and you animate all of them, you know what I mean? You can sit there and say, look at this, isn't that fantastic? But it doesn't mean anything to the audience.
What's it mean to the story?
It doesn't mean a damn thing.
It's a windy day.
And that's what the heck was happening.
And the lawn needs to be cut.
Well, Disney priced himself out of the market
Yeah.
by over-animating everything.
Well, don't you think that's the whole thing with animation today, is that it's gotten so complex instead of returning to its roots and staying simple? Isn't that what really successful animation is? It's a simple idea. It's a basic idea.
That's right.
And there's no frills or any doilies or lace on it. You're just going to give the picture.
Well, right now they're over-animating this new thing they're pushing, that Sigrid and Froy or whatever. No, the new Disney thing.
Oh, Lilo and Stitch.
They're over-animating that.
Well, that's the thing. I think everything is about just trying to do things instead of giving a story.
Oh, every drop of water is followed through to the end, you know what I mean?
Well, that's what I liked about Hanna Barbera. I was thinking that the difference is when you were saying when the little karate mouse goes out with Mr. Jinx, you cut away and hear the sound, and then you cut back and you see him already tied up in a pretzel.
Right.
Today, they would animate the whole thing and show him being tied up and contorted. It would cost probably $200,000, $300,000 for a half a minute of computer animation.
You're absolutely right.
But the fun is that is that something that you got from radio? Is it that you let the mind fill in the blanks?
No, the necessity of animating something that we could do for a price.
So exploiting your limitations.
So when this little Marshall mouse walks right by Tom, and Tom's unbelievable. He says, what the heck? Hey, like just a minute there. I'm the master. Now you cut from that to the other mouse and the other part of the baseboard, and you can hear his voice still saying, I'm the boss around here, or the castle, or the king, or whatever it is. And also you hear crash, bang, crash, wham, bam, wham. And then you cut, and he says, I'm not. Now, just like you said, that was deliberately made that way to save the cost of the scene.
And it works wonderfully.
And it worked great.
Yeah.
The reaction to the jokes was as good as doing them full animation. And it's like the Jonny Quest opening titles. I mean, that's pretty much full animation, but still using all the tricks that we learned from Limited.
You know, and I was going to say that Jonny Quest, that sequence with the frog, the lizard men, the first show.
Yeah.
When you look at Jonny Quest, you think it's a very simple, stylized, almost a static cartoon. But there is a scene in there, several scenes, where Race runs up and crashes into one of the lizard men. And there's a squash and stretch in that drawing. Several drawings. So it's like you say, knowing when to use it and when not to use it.
That's it.
And it really opened my eyes the day that I printed that out at work, and I looked at the thing and the drawing of Race. I mean, he looked like a cartoon instead of like the Kniff style that he was. It was just fantastic.
That's right. Well, let's see if we can wrap this up.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you have any final thoughts, anything you'd like to say before we finish?
Yeah, what studio is this?
This is Van Buren.
That's it, Van Buren.
Let's go down to
You
Fifth.
know what Van Buren was doing when I worked there for a few minutes in animation?
What were they doing?
They were doing there was an animal hunter called Buck.
Buck?
Buck was the name of it. There were some movies made with the African, Simba.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think it was called that. And they also were doing the Charlie Chaplin black and white cartoon.
I was going to say, didn't they do some kind of Chaplin cartoon? Yeah.
Yes, they did.
Yeah. Jesus.
And they were right on 729 7th Avenue in the United Artists Building.
Oh.
And across the street was Fleischer.
Boy, that was a great studio. Popeyes were fantastic.
Yeah, the Popeyes.
With the 3D backgrounds. Those are wonderful.
Well, they hired me I forgot that one incident. I went by that. I met an artist at school at Pratt Institute, and his teacher got me an introduction to a guy named Willard Bowski,
Oh, yeah.
who was an animator.
Yeah, he was a big-time animator at Fleischer's.
He was a big-time animator at Fleischer. And when the war broke out, he signed up. He had this great uniform, and he showed up and said goodbye, and he left. When he arrived in Paris and was killed the same day.
Oh, boy.
That was the end of Mr. Bowski.
Adios, amigo.
Adios, he said.
Hey, hey. All right, well, listen, I'm gonna thank you again. I really do appreciate you taking the time to reminisce with me
Well, if you need to pick
share
up
your
anything,
life.
let me know.
Yeah. You're the best. All right, let me turn this off.